This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Rapido Trains.
Buying Rapido trains will make you happy.
Haven't you heard? Rapido Trains has announced a U-boat load of General Electric U-Series locomotives, U-25Bs, U-30CGs, U-33Cs, and U-36Cs, and the U-34CH. You can check out all of these new releases and much more on their website, rapidotrains.com. Did the snow keep you from getting to the Railroad Hobby Show? No worries. Spring Creek Model Trains has you covered. Right now, ATLP listeners can take 5% off in-stock, regularly priced Rapido Trains products on their website through May 31st. Use code ATLPSPRING26 at checkout at springcreekmodeltrains.com. Serious about your model trains? Protect and organize your prize collection with modeltrainbox.com. Premium CNC cut foam storage boxes and transport cases for both HO and N scales, designed by modelers for modelers, with free U.S. shipping on every order. Durable, stackable, and built to last. Visit modeltrainbox.com and give your fleet the home it deserves. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. It's time once again for Talking Ops with Don Irace, and joining me to do that, of course, is Don Irace. Don, good to see you.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Ray. It's nice and toasty up here tonight. I hope it's nice and toasty where you are.
Well, toasty being a relative term, and it's warming up a little bit. We're getting rid of some of this snow. We're into March now, kind of looking forward to some springtime stuff and getting a little warmer, getting the snow out of the way, but still model railroad season, deep into model railroad season. And I know a lot of folks are still doing a lot of great projects, whether it's warm down in Texas, where I was a couple weeks ago, and now back up here in New England where it's warming up. So we've got hope. We got hope that the things are going to turn around weather-wise. So we're going to expand upon a show that you and I did together a little while ago called Bulletproof Ops. And we're also going to couple that with our conversation we had with Mark Herrick last month when we talked about preparing for out-of-town operators. On this episode, we're going to walk through an operating session on your Providence and Worcester model railroad, from the prep all the way to the end and everything in between. So we're going to get a chance to talk about what happens in that train shed in Sebastian.
Okay, sounds good to me. Let's get going.
Let's kick it off by preparedness. And we want to talk about what it is that you start to do as you know you're going to be hosting a operating session. Let's start right in the beginning, Don.
Okay, so usually the room's a mess between sessions. It's when, between sessions when I kind of, model and do stuff and get little things done I need to get done. Then Wednesday starts creeping up on me. So usually around Monday afternoon and Tuesday, I'll do a little bit each day for preparation. I won't really clean up a lot of stuff because I'm still actively doing some modeling, but I have a motorman from Iowa Scale Engineering, and I got it set up where my track cleaner locomotives are on that system. So I can set up my two Tony's Train Exchange cars, the tank cars, and the motorman will actually run that thing back and forth. So what I do with that is I just, when it gets to one end of the layout, I take the pads off, put new pads on, and I run it back again. And I keep doing that until when I turn the cars over, there's no black on the pads. Or very, very faded black on the pads. This way I know the track is totally clean. It usually takes probably 3 or 4 passes to get the stuff that, we were talking to Mark last time. He had mentioned, the black, gunk on the rails after one session. And, we all get it. It's a DCC, and it's caused between the wheels and the rail and the arcing, and it happens. Everybody gets it. There's no way of getting out of it. So cleaning that off, and then when that run's done, then I transfer the switches over to the sidings, and then I repeat the process. It goes back and forth on the siding tracks until it comes back clean. As far as the branch lines in the sidings where the cars are sitting, I have the track cleaner, the little hand track cleaner that I use, because it's easy just to pull the cars out of the sidings and then just put a little alcohol on there, and I go back and forth. Because to be honest with you, the sidings really don't get dirty. The part that gets dirty is the main line where all the trains run, where all the engines are running. That's where you get that constant buildup. So between Worcester and Valley Falls, you're running a coal train, a stone train, the interchange train. You've got the stone train, interchange, the paper mill. All that stuff is running on the main line. So you have a lot of engines during the course of the evening doing that, so it builds up a lot.
So talk about that buildup, because I know there's some that go, well, I clean my track and I clean all the locomotive wheels, yet this black still hits the rails. Where is it coming from?
All right. So it basically, it's the contact between the wheels and the top of the railhead. The DCC causes arcing. If you run a locomotive in the dock and you let it move, you will actually see these little blue arcs in the rail. It's the AC and it changing over to DCC, and it just causes arcing that DC doesn't do. It's because of the AC voltage in the track that causes it. The DC is direct current, so you don't have any of that. Usually on DC layouts, if you get any kind of buildup, that's basically just dust, grime, just from the air, and then your cars tow all that stuff all over the place. So you don't have to clean every wheel on your rolling stock because your rolling stock doesn't depend on power to move. The engines are the important part; they need to be clean. So, but that's where that all comes from. Now, there's some products out there, they say it stops that, like there's no ox that you can apply on the rail. I have it. I've heard people say, yay and nay on it. Some people swear by it. Other people say it doesn't work. I've been using 70% alcohol for years. It's been tried and true for me. They say that the alcohol keeps everything too dry and you get more arcing. Some guys use wall clipper oil. They'll put a couple of drops on and then they'll send engines around. But when you got grades and helixes and long trains, that can really come back and bite you, because, going to climb a helix with you run it doesn't really happen here, but somebody that's running, 30, 40, 50 car trains up a helix, you just got to put more power on it to get it up there, because the oil is going to make everything slip, So once you figure out that it's a problem, then it takes forever to get rid of it. It collects dust, and you end up with I don't know if you ever tip your locomotive over after a while, you see all this, looks like webbing of felt on the axles on each side of the journal box. And that's just a collection of dust because it gets all frictionized and it sticks to everything. And then the wheels and the engines pick all that stuff up, so it's, I don't know. I go with the alcohol. It works for me. It keeps everything clean. I don't have any problems with electrical pickup. The other thing that I do too is I clean every locomotive before every op session. I have a little, like a 15-inch piece of wood with a track on it, some wire, and alligator clips. And I use this wooden piece only because I can carry it where the locomotives are. Instead of bringing all the locomotives over to the desk, I could just bring the wood there. I put it on the layout. I clip it on the rail, and I can grab a constant pair of locomotives, and I could take them off the rail, put one on at a time, and put one on a table, and I can clean them without breaking the constants down. Because if you have to break your constants all down, that's just more work you got to do to prepare. The point is try to prepare as little as possible, not make more work for yourself. So I'll just go around the whole layout and I'll clean every locomotive, all the track. That's my biggest thing with that, is checking and making sure I got clean everything. And I usually I use the finger test. And if I run my finger on a rail and it comes up a little black on there, I'll run the track cleaners out there again. And I usually do that until I get nothing on my fingers. And then I know we're clean and good to go. So that's about it. That's about it with the cleaning pack. Then we move on to switch lists, So now I got to sit down and I got to redo, half a dozen switch lists, get them prepared. This usually takes place, the switch list stuff kind of takes place almost like 2 days later after the op session, because I got this OCD thing that I can't really do anything unless I get them switch lists all printed out. I don't know why. Because it's fresh in my head and I know where the cars are and I don't have to do a lot of walking around to figure out where this one is and where this one is. I already know from just doing the switch list. So I really use the old switch list to make the new switch list, because I used to have a printer out here, but it died. Well, it didn't die. It's, it didn't like Windows 11. So, I couldn't get drivers for it and it wouldn't run. And so I just ended up getting rid of it. But I got a big printer in the house and it's all networked anyway. So I make the switch list and I just print them. They go in the house. But I just don't want to have to keep going in the house to come back and forth.
So when you do your switch list, do you have to ensure that the previous operating session has been fully completed before you can redo the switch list? Or will you customize the switch list for if an operating session wasn't completed to allow that to be completed? How do you restart the whole thing back at zero, or do you make it a continuation? How do you work that?
All right. No, I do not do a continuation. Everything gets reset. For the most part, the session gets completed soup to nuts. There might be, something small that gets done, but it's very rare occasion that we don't actually finish the whole session. I can pretty much sit down anytime and redo the local jobs. But the job in the CSX shot, I can't, because I started something new. I wasn't swapping cars out when they get back to CSX. I just send the cars back out again to a different place. But now I said, so I got all these cars that are weathered in the box and nobody ever sees them. So I got a box now that I take out and I swap the box cars around. I swap some Gons out, swap a few tank cars out. So there's something different on the layout. So I really can't make that switch list up, or actually it's not really a switch list. It's a yard list. So you use that for what you're going to send over to Worcester. That's basically the interchange. So that slip goes with the trains over to Worcester, and then the yard master will break down the trains according to what's on that list. But like I said, the locals I can do ahead of time. I could probably do, well, I shouldn't say that. I could probably do maybe a week ahead of time. I can't do any more than that. Pretty much everything's got to be done, because there's a car that comes out of the paper mill that gets to Worcester, and it doesn't go back to CSX. It stays in Worcester, and it goes on the interchange train that goes up to Valley Falls, and that boxcar goes on PR3, and that goes over to the key container. So then the rest of the cars, that's the only car that gets held in Worcester. Everything else goes back to the yard. So that's what I mean. So when you're making switch lists up, you really can't do nothing too far ahead of time, because you can really mess up if you don't get the cars right. Because at the paper mill, the cars cycle. You know what I mean? So there's 2 tracks in the paper mill. There's 2 box cars in each track. So track 1 is on the inside. Track 2 is on the outside. So the box car on track 1 in the back is the one that gets pulled and goes back to Worcester. The one on track 1 in the front gets cycled to the back. The box car in the back of track 2 gets cycled to the front of track 1. The box car in the front of track 2 gets cycled to the back of track 2. And then the new car that comes in on the interchange goes in goes in the second track at the top in the beginning. And it's just, all it does is circle around. And that does two things. It cycles the cars through, and it makes for a longer op session because you literally got to switch every car. It's not like you just pull one car and shove the other one in here and you're done. You got to move everything around. But to try to do it, to keep a switch list caught up like that, it's you can't, because I've tried it and it doesn't work. And normally what ends up happening is the operator will say, well, this is not the car that's over there. It's not the same number. Because I got 5 cars that are the same road number, same road, the not letters, the QGRY cars, but in the newsprint cars, but all the other numbers are different. So it doesn't take much or one little mistake to get a car in the wrong place to screw the whole switch list up. A lot of things it's easy too, because I copy and paste stuff on, because I don't really have to put in every one. And using Excel is nice because when you type in the first couple of letters, the whole thing pops into the square. The only trouble is that if you got a bunch of cars with the same 4 letters, and in your head you say, okay, it's there, but it ain't there because it's not even the right number. It's a whole nother number, So I really, really, really got to watch out for that. And I haven't, the last probably 10 op sessions, I haven't had any typos on a switch list. And the other thing I've been doing now is every two cycles, I literally make the switch list up and I literally go to where it is and make sure those cars are right where they're supposed to be. And I go to the interchange and make sure those cars are going to be on the interchange before I send that switch list. That's the nice thing about a laptop. You just carry it all over the place with you, and you don't have to worry about printing it. Oh, that's wrong. Throw it away. Print it. Oh, that's wrong. Throw it away. You just
saves a lot of trees.
Right,
yeah.
Yeah. And it saves me a lot from walking back and forth in the house to the printer.
Yeah, there you go.
Eventually that print is going to come out here and I'm going to buy a new printer for the house. But right now, I really don't have a second printer. I don't really need it. I need to walk and some exercise. I'm not getting any younger. So that little walk back and forth is good. Or if my wife is in the house, she'll bring them out to me. You know what I mean? So it works both ways. But yeah, so switch lists, some of them I can do ahead of time, but most of the time I have to wait until I get out here and finish up what was left over. If there's anything left over, like I said, sometimes I would say 80% of the time we complete the whole session. But if you only got like 3 guys one night, that's if you got 5 guys. And that's if you got 5 guys that are good at what they're doing. You know what I mean? But if you got a new guy in there, that changes the whole aspect of the whole thing, because he might spend a whole night on a job that a regular guy would, be able to do 2 jobs, or maybe 2.5 jobs, or 3 jobs, So
just to clarify with everyone that Don's saying that there'd be 5 people in the layout. They're not eating burgers and fries in his layout. So they're not having 5 guys in the layout. They have 5 people at the layout. But jokes aside here, that whole thing, and we could do another episode just on switch lists alone. And of course, your change from switch lists, you used to do car cards and waybills, now to switch lists. That's a whole other show.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the error checking of that to make sure, and I can see it, and I've seen it on many switch lists, that inverse the number, and it may not seem like a big difference for a layout owner because they know, but they're close to it. When a new operator comes in and sees it, boy, you could spend a lot of time looking for the wrong car for a long time.
And that's happened. I've had a switch list with the wrong number, and they, instead of just asking me, just come up to me and just say, look, this doesn't look right. They're afraid. They're like, he gave me this job. They got this thing. I got to do it. I got to do it myself. I want to do it right. I don't want to have to keep asking a bunch of questions because I want to come back here. You're going to come back. It's got nothing to do with it. I don't care if you ask questions, because if it's a typo, I need to know. You know what I mean? So I can fix it. So normally what I do is eventually I start looking at them and I notice that they're not doing anything. So I'm like, well, something's up. So I go over there. What's going on? I'm trying to find this car. I'm like, okay. But you took like 20 minutes trying to find this car, I says, and I was standing right next to you. Just ask me, So I'm like, okay, which car are you looking for? He says, I'm looking for this one. Well, I know every car on my layout. I could just look around and tell you where that car is. Not even looking at the numbers. I can just tell you, I know what that car's color is. I know how long it is. I know where it is. I know where the only 2 or 3 places that car could even be. So I just look around. I'm like, and I look down at him. I'll go, it's right. I said, it's right there. I said, the problem is that's got the wrong number on it. That's all it is. Just the wrong number. So, like I noticed one today, I have these T, what are they? They're little yellow tank cars. And I noticed instead of being an X on the end, it was a C. It had the right number, but it was just ending in a C instead of an X. And, if you look on your laptop or your computer, you see C's right next to X. So it's not hard. If you're not paying attention, you hit the C instead of the X and it just goes, So that's why every couple of op sessions, I get up and I check everything and make sure everything where it's supposed to be and the road numbers are right, especially with the ethanol cars, because when the ethanol cars came out, they only came out with so many road numbers when I bought them. I bought 12 of them, and probably 6 of them had the same road number. So you got to block a number out or change a number. And normally I don't change the whole thing. I just block out one number and just shorten it up to one number. It's the easiest thing to do. Why go through all that work for one number? So if you I got a 2455 and a 24551. So now I got a 24551, a 2455. So when you're typing, if those 2 cards just so happen to be in that switch list somewhere, whether it's coming in or going out, as soon as you start hitting that number and you get to that 4, that 1 pops right up in there, right? And if you're not paying attention, it autofills, and then you there it is. Now you got 2 cars on the list with the same number, Yeah. So you gotta check. It's just a little bit more effort on my part. Saves the operators a lot of havoc. So it's been.
And from my perspective, I can tell you that I've been one of those new operators who's had a typo on a switch list or the wrong car card. And for the longest time, I'll go, it's got to be me. I'm the new guy. It's got to be my fault. It's got to be here. I can't see it. It's got to be my fault. And it's so important to make sure that, you save those errors, because I'm sure I'm not alone when I'm the new person there thinking, I probably messed up here somewhere. I'm not seeing it. Obviously, this guy knows what he's doing. He owns a layout, and he's put these switch lists together. I should be able to figure this out. It takes a little bit of time. Speaking of rolling stock, let's talk about preparing rolling stock. You mentioned you really can't spend the time and clean all the wheels, but talk about things that you look at for your rolling stock.
Right. Well, for one thing with rolling stock, getting back to the first part we talked about was cleaning the engines of the track. If you keep your track and your engines clean, you're not going to be towing all this grub around on the wheels, because this black stuff will build up on metal wheel sets. It'll build up on plastic wheel sets way faster than metal wheel sets. Metal to metal, or what we have is, I don't know, whatever, most of these wheel sets we got now, metal of brass with nickel plated, so you got nickel on nickel, and that kind of helps. The nickel to nickel contact kind of helps keep it clean. You could say you got the same thing on the locomotives, but the locomotives was causing the problems. The locomotives was causing the arcing. So if it's causing arcing, it's not going to self clean. But with the roller stock, like I said, you can't possibly clean every wheel. I mean, if you got a layout, it's got 5 cars, you can just pop them off, throw them in a cleaner, and just clean and put them back on if you want to do that. But when you got 200, 300, 400, some guys got 600, 700 cars in their layout, they're not gonna do all that. It's insane. So with the roller stock, I mostly look for is the couple heights is the big thing. I'm constantly looking. It's like I work in the yard most of the time on my layout. And I always, when the trains go by me, a lot of times I'm whipping out the camera because I'm like, well, there's a Kodak moment. We can't let this go by, But what I look at in the videos is the couple heights, and I make sure that they are within the tolerance that they need and one of them ain't drooping and it's only catching by a quarter at a couple of in front of it, you know. And what I do is when I see that, I write it down on a piece of paper and the car number. I don't take the car off the layout. I will just make note of that car's got a couple of droop, and on what side of the couple of droop it's on, the brake wheel end or the other end. And then when the op session's over, then I will take that list out and I will pull them cars off the layout and I'll put them on my, again, I got that 15-foot piece of wood with the HO scale track on it, and it's got the couple of height things on both sides of it. So it's my universal tool for cleaning and fixing rail cars. And I'll shim the trucks or whatever. The trouble with it is I use the 158 scale heads, and they've yet to make those in offset and underset, you know, so you got to depend on shims. That's really the only way to fix it, you know. I mean, there's different tricks to it, the fixing them but that's the only thing you're looking for. Cars that are rocking back and forth, that's usually a sign that the trucks are too loose. If they're going back and forth like that, you don't want the trucks tight, because if you think of the prototype, when any rail car derails, where the wheels go, they just go flying in all different directions. There's no Phillips head screw on the bottom of them things.
That'd be a big Phillips screw.
Right. You'd have to have a hell of a screwdriver to fix those cars.
That's right.
So they're on a pin. That's what they're on. They're just sitting on a pin. And so they just rock. If you see some trains, real trains on crappy track, that they rock, the harmonic balance back and forth, it gets to the point where it looks like the car's just going to just flop over on its side. You get the same, you're going to get that in HO scale or the model, because your track is more stable. It's not sinking in the ground, and it's never going to happen. It's not on sand. It's on home soda, foam, or whatever. But you still will get the screws come loose, just from the twisting and the turning, and they will eventually get so loose where they'll start rocking. I mean, I've had a car derail here. I'm not going to say I never have derailments. You get them every now and then. And the car goes on its side, and the truck is still sitting on track, and the screw is not even in it. And God only knows how long that screw hasn't been there, But you could tell from the car just going through a turnout, and it just shudders too much. And then you got some cars that the screws kind of tighten, and it over torques the screw, and then the car won't go through the curves and the ladders and everything. It'll derail. So usually when I see that happening, when the car comes in the yard and I just make a note of it again, and it's just a matter of putting a screwdriver in, just give it like a little bit of a turn to loosen it up. So one truck should be pretty almost rigid, not rigid where it won't flop. It should flop. And then one in the back should be a little bit more, because one of them keeps the car from flopping. If they're both really loose, the car's going to flop. If one's loose and one's a little tighter, it'll also keep the car from flopping. But I try to keep everything the same. So basically I tighten the screws up till the truck will just about turn, and I'll just back off it like maybe like an eighth of an inch. You know what I mean? Just enough so the truck will navigate. Because the problem with the model is that if you don't have like climate control room, or you're in a damp basement in the summer and the winter and the heat and the cold, and your track moves around, your bench work moves around, you're going to get heaves in your track, and switches are going to move. And this is when you start noticing cars picking switches and not tracking well on your track. So make sure your couplers are good. And everything is, and the couple is, that little tolerance there. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfectly dead on. I mean, in a perfect world, we want them perfectly dead on, but they can be a little bit off, because if you have a dip in your track, especially if you're going up a helix, and if you don't have a rigid helix where it keeps the wood from drooping down, it'll, the couples will just come, especially a scale head coupler. Number 5 couples are more forgiving. You start getting into a scale head coupler, you really got to watch that, because it'll just come off, and next thing you know, half your train will go flying back down in the helix. And if it makes it to the bottom in one piece, you're lucky, But that's, that's really it. Like I said, a lot of people use number 5s. I don't like the number fives because, to be honest with you, I don't like they don't look good in videos and they don't look good in photos. It's just like it's just took like a big monster on the back of a car. It's not supposed to be that size. I mean, you look at a box car, and you look at the cupola, and other than a shelf cupola, they look really tiny, So, and the other thing a lot of guys do too is they cut the trip pins off. Again, it's when you look at a prototype train going a track, you see hoses hanging and connected to each other. When you have the model, those trip pins are for uncoupling purposes, but they also imitate an air hose connection. And when your couples are level and you get those, and those things are all level, it looks like it's a nice train going by because everything looks like it's supposed to look, So as far as it with box cars, that's really the only thing you really can look at.
And it seems like a yard is a great place to pick that up. So with you, like you mentioned, you operate your yard, so you get a chance to see all of this. And hey, that's a great recommendation for other layout owners. Work your yard and get a look at all the rolling stock during a session.
Yep. Set a camera up at ground level and video them trains as they're coming through the yard, because the camera will pick up stuff that your eye just will not pick up. I've taken photos. I'm like, wow, this is a perfect shot. I take a photo at the end. I go home in the house at night and I look through the photos to adjust them and to crop them and everything. And I'm like, oh crap, what's that thing sitting over there? That just ruined the whole photo. You know what I mean? That's not supposed to be there.
It's in the shed.
Right. So you got to go back out and do it again. So I mean, I just put my iPhone at a low angle, like you were human, you were actually taking a video at track height. And you'd be surprised what you see when that train goes by, and if everything looks good, it looks good. But if you go by and you got a couple just about hanging onto the couple in front of it, that's a problem. That's a problem when you're operating too, because if that couple is dropping off, it's, the guy operating it, he's going to be like, how's this guy's going to fix these couples or what? You know what I mean? It's all maintenance stuff. So, and, like the other stuff too, I was listening to one of the other podcasts, not our podcast, but another show. And somebody had mentioned, having problems with cars, with their rolling stock, or some of the rolling stock. And an operating session is an operating session. I personally firmly believe that all hosts should be operating with their operators. The worst thing is for the host to be walking around just looking at stuff, because that's not good. That's not good, because sometimes you like, why is he doing that? And then you go over there and say, well, what are you doing it that way for? Because let them do it the way they want. No two train crews do everything the same way. Every crew has their own way of doing things. And trust me, that goes on here. Believe me, I've seen some of my regular guys, and they admitted it the other night too. They go, Sam, I've been doing this job, and so I'm going to try to do it a little different tonight. You know what I mean? And he says, I can't believe that just a few changes made the whole job seem like it was brand new, and it worked out great. So that's why I don't tell my operators, if I said, here's your paperwork, here's your engine, here's your throttle, here's your radio. It's all on you now. I go and do my job. I just don't know how a host can build an operating layout and let everybody else have all the fun.
Yeah, you want to be able to see your layout come to fruition and be a part of it, right? That whole idea and dream of this thing running like a real railroad. Why not be a part of it? Don't just spectate it. I mean, it is nice to take a step back and kind of look around a little bit, but also be a part of it as well. I think that's some solid advice. And speaking of operators, let's get to a point where we're starting to put crews together and talk a little bit about crew management. Talk about the invitations and how that's all handled for the P&W.
All right. So on the P&W, all the ops notification goes out on Sunday at some point during the day, always on Sunday. This way I give every operator ample amount of time to either in or they can't. If they want to come and they can readjust their schedules, that's all well and good. So I give them, it's like a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They got like a 3-day advance notice. Everybody's on a list, whether you come all the time or not. And it's just now. So I'll just say, look, we're gonna have an op session on Wednesday, such a such date at 6:30 p.m. And I just put, if yay and nay, basically, and I'll get within 5 or 10 minutes. I've got pretty much answers from the guys I know that they're going to come every week. I have there's 2 or 3 guys that have their jobs kind of warrant what they got to do scheduling wise. So again, I give them guys this opportunity, a little head start, so they can reach out to wherever is scheduling their schedules to say, look, am I gonna be home this Wednesday? Am I gonna be away? Am I leaving in the morning, be back at night so I can make the op session? You know what I mean? And it usually works pretty good like that. So, and then it also shows me how many guys I'm actually going to have. Because if I can't get at least 3 guys, I won't even bother. I'll just cancel the whole thing, because to do all this setup for 2 people, it's just, it's not even worth it. And then in the next session, you can say, well, why don't you just pick up where you left off? Well, yeah, you could, but the chances are you're going to get back to, you have to have these switch lists built in advance to fall back on, which I could on a few of them, but not all of them. And I've tried it, and I just find it just doesn't work. I rather I'll just come in here and finish it up myself and get it back so it starts from scratch again.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of a version of kicking the can down the road, and it just doesn't seem like it would line up very well, especially with a cycle being set with your operating.
Yeah.
If you do have some folks that are unable to make it, you have a reserve list. How does that work?
Well, yes. So in the wintertime, I probably have like 2 or 3 people I can call on a reserve list. But once April comes in the beginning of May, I've got 1, 2, 3 snowbirds. And then when they're gone, that leaves me, 1 guy in Vero, and 2 guys that are schedule dependent. So we don't do a lot of operating in the summertime because it's just me and Chip, and maybe if John's around, if Jeff's around, and that's it. You know what I mean? There's, the trouble is I don't like to get too much of a list, because then I feel bad when the winter comes back and the regular operators are here. They're expecting they're going to be here. I don't want to start saying, look, I got these guys, they're coming now, so you're going to go to spare board. I have a hard time with that. You know what I mean? I want everybody to come. That's what I want.
I would say beyond locomotive cleaning, track cleaning, rolling stock management, and waybills, the people management's got to be the toughest of all of it. Just making sure that you maintain a crew, keep everybody happy, keep them in the cycle, and make sure that you have a depth chart that allows you to have the 5 you really are looking for to make sure that you can run an operating session.
And that's all. That's good, but that's all based on where you live too. You know what I mean? When I was in Rhode Island, I had 15 operators every week. I probably had another 10 on a spare board. Because in Rhode Island and Northeast, there's way more guys up there to operate than there is down here. It's a small state. Connecticut, Massachusetts border Rhode Island. It's no more than 3/4 of an hour ride for any one person to come, So I had a big spare board up there, and I always had 15 operators. And I don't think we ever really operated with less than that. But down here, a little by little, we're pulling them out of the woodwork, little at a time. I had a guy here today. He moved here from Australia to Oklahoma, and now he's in Lakeland. Lakeland's like in the middle of the state, just below Orlando. I'm like, it's a 2-hour ride to here, So, but he came today, he left his house or whatever. He was here at noontime, and he left at like 2:30, 2:45, But then I got another guy up in the Villages. He came from Colorado. He moved to Florida. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do now is I'm going to have my usual usually me and John alternate back and forth on Wednesdays. I'll operate, then if he's around, we'll operate his layout and we'll go back and forth. Once Jeff's layout becomes available, then I don't know what, depending on his schedule is, Wednesdays are tough for him. So we may have to kind of adjust some stuff once he gets going. Then we'll have his layout, and he's like probably an hour north of me, which is down here to drive an hour is not the equivalent for me driving to the Orlando airport. Once you do it for 6 years, it doesn't even bother me anymore. So, but it's just to get people to come. Like Chip had a guy lived near him. He's in Port St. Lucie, and he came up one night and he had a ball. He's, I'd like to come back again. Then so I said, Chip, I'll see if your friend wants to come back up. And he says it's too long of a ride, and he's only coming like 45 minutes. You know what I mean? So getting back to what I was really going to say, I think we're going to start doing some Saturday sessions. So Saturday works out because if I can set up a session here and at John's on the same day, then to make it easy for these guys to come over for a couple hours, we can operate on my layout. We can go for a lunch, and then we'll go to John's and operate on his layout. And then they'll have their full. You know what I mean?
Yeah, make it the ride worth it. Get 2 operating sessions in, 2 great operating sessions, combining John's layout with yours, and that's for sure. And for anybody listening, if the P&W is looking for operators. If you're willing to move to the Treasure Coast, no relocation expenses are covered. But if you want to get out there and get closer, Don's looking for operators.
If you don't mind driving,
reach out around the layout at gmail.com.
If you don't mind driving, you're more than welcome. Just contact me and let me know, and we'll hook you up. I mean, I can do Wednesdays. I can do Saturdays. It's actually Saturdays are probably easier to do than Wednesdays even. So we're still tweaking this operation things down here. This operation thing down here on the East Coast is really new in the last, I went from having nobody but myself and my father when he was down here, just being him operated. And then John, I got hooked up with John. Then Dick got hooked up when he found out, and he lives he's only like 20 minutes away from me in Barefoot Bay. And like I said, Jeff's up in Merritt Island. So, guys, if they don't mind driving, and Jeff just comes down here from work. He works in Palm Bay, so he just comes right from work, so you don't have to go home and then come back. But yeah, so and the other thing too, talking about crew management, is to make sure you're going to have enough jobs for your operators, especially if they got to drive 2-3 hours, or in some cases, if you're doing something on a Saturday with other operators, and guys will fly in if they want to come in, you know what I mean, and spend the money to fly in. You got to have enough work. If you're going to have 5 guys, then you should have at least 10 jobs. So you should have at least figure, if you're going to operate 2 or 3 hours, you should figure to have at least 2 jobs per guy. All right. So I got 5 guys. I've got 12 jobs, and I've got a couple of extra jobs I can throw in if I have to. You know what I mean? Like we've been playing, I don't know if I seen my Facebook page this week for the slap side. We ran the 29 high rail car around the truck, and I put all these new Mac rail, top rail greases in. I'm waiting for the 4th one, and I'm going to put the 4th one in. And what the high rail guy does, he just goes out and he jumps in his truck. He gets to the crossing. He calls his dispatcher. He puts his track car on the crossing, gets the wheels down, and then he starts heading out, and he stops at all the top rail greases. And the rule is, you get to the greaser, and you got to look at the fast clock. It's here, and you got to sit at that greaser for 15 minutes on a fast clock. And you're gonna go. You're gonna fill the greases up, right? It's yep. and as a track car, so it's not flying around at 90 miles an hour. You go easy because it is a track car. It's very light in weight. You got to be careful when you're going through turnouts with it, because if you go through too fast, it'll pop off. And you're gonna have to reset, pull it back on the flat track, because you cannot. It's impossible to put it back on a switch. It's impossible to put anything back on a switch. Really, you should always pull your power back off on a straight piece of track and reset it. Don't, because the best way to blow a decoder up is try to reset a locomotive on a switch somewhere. There's just too many rails to pick from. So, and he just drives around and he goes all the way to the end. And then he goes to the other. Lucky for me, I got crossings on both sides. So he just goes to the other crossing. He pulls it up, spins it around, puts it back on, and then he comes all the way back into Worcester again. And it'll take him probably a good 45 minutes just to do something that simple that, for a guy to do, So
I think it's a great, and it really is kind of the freight only layout version of running a passenger train, right? Because that's essentially what a passenger train is doing. It's going to different stops, stopping and picking up passengers, dropping off passengers, etc. And it's a great way to keep a dispatcher busy, keeps them, occupied while other trains are doing, switching work and are at wherever they're working. So yeah, what a great concept. So when these folks show up, and now you talked about, the evolvement of your operations and getting more people involved. Now that you've run a bunch of sessions, has that changed the way that you do your pre-operations orientations or your meetings or the instructions? Do you now have guys that really assume it, or do you still have guys that you really need to still do that pre-orientation kind of thing?
The only time we do the pre-orientation is if I get somebody new. These guys have been coming here long enough. They know all the jobs. They know what's expected of them to do the job. They know that they got to watch for the derails. They got to watch for the flags. They got to, they got to use the EOTs because you got to put your EOT on it. No matter, I don't care how hard it is for your fingers to put them on the back of that coupler. Don't come back to the yard without that EOT on a train.
Yeah, don't put it on the roof either. Yeah,
how many times I used to see them laying in the grass and the train's all put away, and I'm like, where the hell's all my EOTs? I got a whole pile of them. So, but yeah. And I also changed my switch list, and on the bottom of the switch list in red, bold, it gives you, don't forget to reset the derails and the flags and make sure your EOTs are on the back of your train to bring it back. So there's no reason why you could say, oh, I forgot, But if I have a new guy, yes, we have to go. Everybody goes through the orientation if there's a new guy, especially if I made changes. And I do make a lot of changes, and I have to even let the new guys know if there's any kind of changes that I've made to different things, So, yeah, so that's, like I said, when you got bigger crews or when you have guests, if you're set up for operating for a guest for some special event, then you're definitely gonna have to do the, all the talking and stuff in between, especially if you're using radios, because it's radio etiquette is like very important on a railroad, a remote dispatcher, because if you let the dispatcher talk, if you don't let the carrier drop out before you start yakking, he's not going to hear nothing you're going to say, and then you're going to have to repeat it all over again. That just prolongs everything. So some guys catch on to it the first or second time. Some guys don't catch up onto it at all, but it's,
You alluded to this earlier that you like to operate when you have operating sessions, and you have good reasons for that. It keeps you out of the hair of these other operators and lets them do their thing. Plus, maybe more importantly, you get to enjoy the experience of your operating session. But when folks have questions or problems or whatnot, talk about that process. And I know, again, you're one that wants to be approached. You don't want somebody standing there guessing.
Right, exactly. So what I tell, especially new operators, if you have a problem and you're probably gonna have a problem, you're gonna have questions. There's no way that you can walk in here from the street new and just dive right in. There's going to be some point in that session, that job, you're gonna be looking for some answers. So normally I work in the yard. So if there's a new guy in a paper mill, I'm like, I'm right here. If you just turn around and say, look, what's the deal with this? And I will turn around and I will help you with that and get you by that. If a guy's working PR2 on the other side and I got a regular guy working PR3, I say, if you have any questions, talk to him because he's right there. You know what I mean? There's no point of you coming all the way around the layout to me when the guy is standing right next to you can answer all your questions, So that's the advantage of a smaller layout. and people are closer together. I mean, we're not on top of each other, you know that, but you're in range,
Right.
you're in voice range to ask a question. So that's what I do. I just say, look, if you can come and ask me if you want, but he is just as knowledgeable as I am. He's done his job multiple times, and he can answer any questions you have. And it just saves people from like, can I get by? Can I get by to go to me? Then can I get by? Can I get by to get back? You know what I mean? It's just, or don't start hollering over the top of the fascia, and just everybody's in a close voice range. When you're on a bigger layout, like I had in Rhode Island, then that you get new operators there. But usually when we had new operators, I didn't operate on that layout. I'll say that. Any special events on a layout that size, you could pretty much forget about operating as a host. And even the 4 or 5 regular operators I bring in. So if we're having a convention and we're having, usually my op sessions are 15 operators, but on a special event, I'll do maybe 11 because I'll bring in 4 or 5 of my regular operators. They will be shadowing you, So this way here, They don't have to all become baka to me, because I've been to layouts where everybody in the room wants to talk to the host and say, and they all just like stand in line. I have a question. I have a question. I have a question. I have a question. That's why we bring in your seasoned guys. Then, they know they're not going to operate. I had it. Now we're at layout in Rhode Island. I got to say, I had a fantastic crew. I can't really say anything better than that. My guys were the best, especially when we hosted a lot of conventions and all kind of stuff, stuff for Springfield and the RPM up there. And these guys are always there. I said, look, this is the event. This is where we're going to be. We're going to operate. It's like a national convention in Hartford. We operated 4 or 5 sessions, right? We had to, because they begged me to, because they had so many guys coming to the convention and wanted to operate. They didn't have enough operating spots. So I operated like 5 times. And I got pictures of my guys sleeping on the floor between sessions. Literally sleeping. Joe Grossetti was in the corner, all huddled up in the corner over there. Russ fell asleep. A lot of guys just sat on the bench and just took like a half an hour siesta between the crew that was just here and the crew's coming in another hour, and we restaged everything, got everything going again. And we had the car cards. So I went through flipping all the car cards over, because nobody, Mark could help me with the car cards because he was pretty familiar with the setup. But I tell you what, if it wasn't for those guys, forget it. I probably wouldn't even do it, because I maybe do one, but to do back op sessions, you got to have very dedicated operators to help you with that, But like I said, these guys were the best. I can't say enough about it, and they were a really big help to me when it comes time to hosting other guests.
I know it's ideal to have no problems during a session, but if you do, how do you manage that in a way of, do you take notes? How do you make sure that, you document it and be able to address it before the next operating session?
All right. So if there's a power problem, say I got problems with power, you just make a note of it. The guy who calls, look, and I tell these guys before time, if there's any problems, power pickup, car problems, throttle problems, any kind of problems, just tell me, and so I can write it down. Because if you don't tell me there's a problem, I ain't gonna know. I'm not doing your job. I'm doing my job. I can't. It's impossible for me to be in your head and be in my head at the same time. So just come over and say, look, after the job's done, or if you're having a continuous problem there, just tell me, look, I'm having a problem over here. If it's a continuous problem and the problem's so bad that the job's not getting done, I will go over there and I will see if I can, simply fix it. You know what I mean? Power problems around this layout are pretty much existent. We don't have power problems here. You know what I mean? I don't think I've ever had a power problem over here on this layout. If you got a rolling stock problem, those are easy. There's little pink bad order pads all over the place. You if you have a car, if it's car cards, you pick up, you would pull the car card out, take the car off the layout, put the car card with it, with the bad order, what the problem is on a bad order, put it on the desk, because I'm not going to start pulling tools out to fix a car. It's easier for me just to reach down in the box and grab you another car, and you just scribble a car number on the switch list and call it a day. You know what I mean?
There you go. Yeah.
We're not gonna break out soldering irons and solder and flux and wire and spools and all this stuff to fix stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, imagine if you did. I mean, the idea is to keep the operating session going, right?
Right. Just keep the operating session moving, because if it doesn't move, and after 3 hours, you're expected to be here and you're not even halfway through. You know,
Yeah.
if you're gonna, and if this goes to the back-to-back operations, if you're bringing a crew in and 2 hours from now, somehow you're gonna manage to feed your crew, you gotta eat, you gotta restage everything, get it all set up again to fire it off for the second crew coming in. If you don't get through halfway through the op session, how are you possibly going to restage that op session for the next session and fix the problems? This is why you fix the problems before. Every host should run all his jobs, simulate running it, even if you're just running the locomotives in the areas, because the locomotives and the power is usually the biggest problem. Not as much moving the cars around. Cars can easily be taken care of. Just take this car off, use this car. And then that problem goes away really fast that way. But you know, if you're going to sit there and break tools out and try to fix stuff, you're just prolonging the operation. If you're just doing a single night operation, you still don't break out the tools because it just doesn't look good. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, you just go on, move on. That's what I say. Just move on.
So, Don, you've talked us through track cleaning and locomotive wheel cleaning and rolling stock preparedness up to switch lists and, of course, putting the crew together, all for a successful operating session. And I know there's always a why behind the things you do. And I know you would say do them all, but if a layout owner wanted to start hosting operating sessions, what is one preparedness step they should never skip?
The track and the power, because usually track power and bad sections of track is usually the number one thing in model railroading that's always the thing that always goes wrong, mostly at turnouts. Either point rails are not powered, you know, they're not making contact, because a lot of switches depend on feed-through power off a point, and, you know, it's dependent. The point gets powered depending on which side of the rail it's touching. Eventually, as your track ages and starts to oxidize, and nickel silver track does not oxidize like brass does, it still gets oxidized on the sides because the sides never get used. Nothing's ever running on the sides. The top of the rail is nice and shiny, but just like the prototype, the top of the rail is shiny, but the side of the rail is all rusty. So prototype, they're not electric trains. Well, some of them are, but most of the electric's all fed from overhead. But the shiny rail will conduct power beautiful, but the side of the rail won't conduct power because it's so rusty. You know, there's no continuity there. So you should make sure. And what I do is I have my ramp meter, which, you know, you can still buy, and it's a nice DCC meter. It tells you can do amperage, you can check your voltage. And you just I take the probes off my meter and I plug it into my ramp meter, and I go around and I put one on the main rail and I touch the points when the point rail off the main rail. That's when I touch the point rail, and I want power on that point rail. I want power on that point rail, even if it's not touching the stock rail, because just because that rail hits the stock rail doesn't mean that the power is going to transfer into the point rail. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what happens, you end up with a 3-inch dead spot. So if you have locomotives that don't have capacitors, or you have short wheelbase locomotives, they're not going to make it through the switches. You know what I mean? If you got, so if you're going to host an op session, be a little diligent and go through your whole layout with a meter of some sort, and make sure your point rail is, as long as the point rail is not touching the stock rail, check the voltage there and make sure you got voltage on that rail all the time. If not, you got to figure out why. And there's a small little section, right? Like the old Atlas. I mean, I don't know if anybody uses them anymore. I'm sure there's a lot out there. Has the rivet that controls the point back and forth. Well, what happens eventually, especially if when you put the switch down at first, it's great. It works fabulous. But over time, dirt and grub and all kind of crap gets in between there, and the continuity gets less and less and less to the point where the continuity gets broken right off. You can drill a hole next to the little rail that's attached to, make a drop through the layout, and solder a wire to the side of that rail. Will it help? You got a 50-50 shot. For those kind of situations, they make a conductive grease that you can put on a toothpick and you can rub it around that rivet and everything. You'd be surprised how that helps clear up a power issue there. A lot of the new turnouts now, they don't have that rivet thing. Well, Atlas had the rivet. That thing is going on. They don't even make them anymore. It's a lot nicer. It doesn't move a lot. The other thing I've done too is get stranded, like if you got some number 22 stranded wire, cut some off, unwrap it to get one of the strands that are in there, and then solder one side of that strand to one side of the point rail and just make a little loop and go to the stock rail on the other side. This way here, now your current is traveling through the wire to the stock rail, and it don't care about the rivet or that hinge point anymore. The hinge point becomes null at that point, because the power is being routed around that point. And that helps a lot, you know what I mean? It's anything to keep power on that rail, to keep the engines moving through there. I mean, the other thing you can do if you don't want to do that is put capacitors in all your locomotives, something beefy enough that will keep the power going. Like I use all the ESU stuff. Probably maybe a quarter of my fleet has the new board with the integrated capacitors built right onto it. And then, you can use really anybody's capacitors, doesn't matter. So whatever your flavor is. But in the ESU program, you go into the power pack setting, you got from 0 to 255. Most of the time, they're set around 30. So what I do is mine's boosted up to like almost 100, because I don't have anywhere where an engine's going to go off the end of the layout onto the floor. At each end of my point to point is a wall. Most it's going to do is run into the wall if it keeps going, and it's not going to, my old layout, I had some spots where I had rail driven through at the end of the track spur where especially if engines were going down there, they're going back into the engine house. And one of them went off the engine of the layout one night onto the floor, a GP38. And I picked it up. The chassis was bent in half, so I had to buy a new chassis for that. But yeah, so the number one thing that you want to do before you start hosting is check in and make sure your track's all powered up, your points is powered up, everything's good, everything's clean. Run an engine that does not have a capacitor in it. Preferably a shorter wheelbase locomotive would help, because that will find every bad spot on your layout. Trust me, it will. On my track cleaning cars, the engines do not have capacitors for a reason, because if there ain't dead spots out there, I want to know where they are. You know what I mean? So I can fix it.
At the end of an operating session, what kind of feedback are you looking for?
If everybody comes in and they operate and then everybody goes home and it's, oh yeah, great job, we had a blast, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, until they get out to the car. Then all the blah, blah, blah goes away, and then all the stuff comes out like, I was over here and I kept pushing this engine to the switch and it wasn't running right, blah, blah, blah. But the host doesn't know these things, so he just thinks everything's all hunky-dory, So it's very important for the host. I wouldn't call it out during a session. I would never do that. I'm not calling out anybody, but I'll just send the host an email and I'll say, look, I was here. This was giving me a problem. This, maybe go look at it, see if you got a problem there, whatever it is, fix it. So the next time it works fine, and then the host appreciates that kind of input. You don't think they're going to get mad at you and not have you back. I'd love to have guys that keep coming back that would call me out on stuff, via email or after the session's over, because it helps me make my railroad better. So the next time operators come, they have, so if these guys come back again and they say, oh yeah, we had a great time, and they go home and you never hear from anybody, you guarantee on the ride home in the car, like, oh, this is fantastic. Everything ran good. We didn't have any problems. He fixed this and da. And everything's good. And you should be happy about that. You know what I mean? So input from the operators is very important when you're hosting layouts, when you're hosting an op session, because the main goal is to keep the operators happy so they come back. So, some guys won't say nothing. They just won't come back. So if they don't come back, you know why. I'm just being honest I've been doing this for a long time. I have a lot of op sessions under my belt. I probably have somewhere in the 2000s by now of operating sessions between all layouts I've ever had. So I kind of know what I'm talking about. And I know the host is not going to be mad that somebody said, look, you got problems here. You should really pay attention to it.
Well, last month I mentioned the 5 Ps. For this one, we'll have to call it the 6 Ps, that proper planning prevents poor performance on the P&W. So there's your 6th P. And Don, thank you so much for taking us on a walk through an operating session on the P&W in Sebastian, Florida, and all the prep that you put into it. And then obviously what happens during an operating session. And of course, at the end, and all that great feedback you get from your operators. Great to talk ops once again with you, and look forward to talking ops once again next month.
Yes, sir. See you next month.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.